In March 2024, a geological survey team drilling near Point Pleasant, West Virginia hit a cavity 47 feet down. And when they pulled their equipment back up, it was covered in something they could not identify. They lowered a camera into the opening, and what appeared on the monitor looked like colonization of insects. Except it was scaled to sizes no known arthropod could possibly reach. Officials showed up expecting a sinkhole, but what they found waiting below was a nest, and it was not empty. North of Point Pleasant sits the TNT Area, 8,000 acres of land that during World War II housed a massive munitions facility with hundreds of concrete igloos storing explosives. After the war ended, the government abandoned the entire operation, and the buildings simply sat there weathering and filling with shadows while the forest slowly took it all back. Decades passed with nothing but silence. And then in November 1966, two couples driving near the area reported seeing something over 7 feet tall, gray-skinned and winged with those wings folded tight against its body. What dominated their story, what they could not stop talking about, were the eyes, large, red, glowing even in darkness, positioned right where a face should be. When they hit the gas and tried to get away, the thing pursued them, not running but flying. It kept pace with their vehicle at speeds they estimated at over 100 miles per hour until they reached the city limits, and then it just vanished into the darkness above the Ohio River. Over the next 13 months, more than 100 people came forward with encounters, and the descriptions matched with a consistency that was hard to ignore. Large, winged, gray, and always those red eyes watching with an intelligence that felt completely wrong. The local newspaper gave it a name, Mothman. Researchers started showing up, investigators interviewed witnesses, and theories spread like wildfire. Some people claimed it was an undiscovered species, others insisted it was misidentified birds. Skeptics wrote the whole thing off as mass hysteria, but the sightings just kept coming. December 15, 1967 changed everything when the Silver Bridge collapsed during rush hour, sending vehicles plunging into the frigid Ohio River and killing 46 people. After that disaster, the sightings stopped almost completely, and Mothman became folklore instead of an active mystery. A festival started, they put up a statue downtown, and the creature transitioned from something people feared to something they celebrated. Except the sightings never actually stopped. They just went quiet. Hikers glimpsed something massive moving through the canopy. Hunters discovered tracks that did not match any known animal. Most of these reports never made it into official records because people learned fast that claiming to see Mothman got you laughed at. The official line was crystal clear: the creature was folklore, nothing more, and anyone still reporting encounters was just looking for attention. When the Geological Survey team reached out to Kendrick Voss about their discovery in March 2024, he did not believe them at first. Voss had spent 20 years as a private wildlife researcher investigating cryptid reports all across Appalachia. And underground cavities were a dime a dozen in West Virginia. But the photographs they sent changed everything. The walls of the cavity were organic, made from fibrous material matted together in layers that somehow maintained their shape despite all that soil pressure, and the texture looked exactly like paper wasp nests except at a scale that made zero biological sense. Sample analysis came back showing cellulose from local vegetation mixed with an adhesive compound that laboratory testing could not identify, which meant someone built this, or more accurately, something built it, and the cavity was just the entrance to whatever lay deeper. Voss put together a team fast: Merritt Haldane, a spelunker who knew his way around unmapped cave systems, Thaddeus Crane, an entomologist who specialized in social insect architecture, and Sable Drummond, a documentary filmmaker who had covered his previous investigations. They got their permits by carefully dancing around words like nest or creature, and framing the whole thing as geological research. And by early April, they were breaking ground. 3 days of hard work exposed an opening big enough to squeeze through, and Haldane went down first, roped up and wearing full caving gear while his helmet camera transmitted live footage that made everyone watching go dead silent. The entry shaft opened into a chamber 30 feet across with walls made of that same fibrous construction. Layered and dense, but what stopped them cold was the architecture itself. Because this chamber wasn't natural, it was designed. The walls curved in geometric patterns. Support structures branched from floor to ceiling, creating a framework that distributed weight with the kind of precision you would expect from an engineer. And tunnels radiated out from the central chamber in perfect circles, going deeper into the earth. Haldane's voice came crackling through the radio, steady, but you could hear the strain when he said he had explored caves all over Appalachia and had seen geological formations that looked almost intentional. But this was different because this was built. The whole team went down together the next day and started mapping everything, photographing every detail, collecting samples while Crane examined the structural engineering with growing unease. Social insects could build complex nests, termites made mounds with ventilation systems, wasps constructed paper nests with hexagonal precision. But those structures measured in feet, maybe yards at most. This chamber stretched 30 feet across and kept going down to depths they had not measured yet, which meant if insects built this, they would have to be absolutely enormous. They picked the largest tunnel and started exploring, following it down at a constant angle with smooth, uniform walls, and every 20 feet the passage widened into smaller chambers branching off the main shed. These subsidiary chambers held something Crane recognized immediately: cocoons, hundreds of them, each one roughly 4 feet long and constructed from that same fibrous material, all hanging from ceiling attachments while Sable's camera captured everything. The cocoons were intact, but completely empty, and whatever had been living inside them was long gone, with splits running along each casing where something had torn its way out from the inside. Crane moved in close to examine several of them, and the emergence pattern matched insect pupation perfectly, which meant something had grown inside these casings, reached maturity, and then broken free. The size created an immediate problem because a 4-foot cocoon would house a 4-foot insect, and no such insect existed anywhere on Earth, and had never existed according to the entire fossil record. They kept going deeper. The main shaft dropped 200 feet before it ended in what you would have to call a nursery, a massive chamber that extended beyond the reach of their portable lights. Thousands of smaller cocoons covered the floor, arranged in organized rows that were different from the ones they had found above, because these were fresher. The material had not calcified yet. Crane approached the nearest one carefully and touched its surface, felt it give under his fingers, warm and soft, and he jerked his hand back immediately because the cocoons were not empty remnants from something that happened years ago. They were active, and something was still inside. The team pulled back to debate what to do next because they had just discovered a nest of unknown origin containing evidence of large-scale biological activity that contradicted everything known about arthropods on this planet. The responsible move would have been sealing the site and calling in authorities with actual expertise. But they had all seen the sightings database, knew the 1966 descriptions by heart. Large winged red eyes and a nest beneath the TNT area would explain absolutely everything. Voss made the call, and they were going to open one cocoon. Crane used surgical tools to make a careful incision along the seam where natural emergence would happen, and the fibrous casing parted easy enough. Warm air rushed out, carrying an odor like rotting leaves mixed with copper, and when Crane widened the opening and angled his light inside, what he saw would show up in his nightmares for years afterward. The creature inside was in late-stage development, with a segmented body covered in a chitinous exoskeleton that had not fully hardened yet. 6 limbs folded against the torso, each one ending in appendages that looked more like hands than anything you would find on an insect. The torso had humanoid proportions, but the structure was clearly arthropod, and wings lay folded against its back with membranes stretched between supporting struts. The head was the worst part, too large, with a structure suggesting compound eyes that had not developed function yet, and between where those eyes would eventually be sat a facial configuration that mimicked human features just enough to trigger something deep and wrong in anyone looking at it. The thing looked like it was trying to be human, failing at it, creating something caught between insect and person that did not belong to either. Crane sealed the cocoon right then and there, and the team retreated to the surface without a word between them during the entire climb. When they emerged into afternoon sunlight, it felt impossibly bright after those hours underground. That night, Sable reviewed the footage, the massive chambers, the thousands of cocoons, the thing inside developing in total darkness. She made copies of everything and stored them in multiple locations, a precaution that ended up saving her life. They went back down the following morning, expecting everything to be exactly as they had left it. The excavation site was undisturbed, and they descended along their mapped route with the central chamber looking unchanged. But when they reached the nursery level, something was off. The cocoon they had opened sat empty now. The incision Crane had made was torn wider from the inside, which meant whatever had been in there had emerged underdeveloped and incomplete, forced out too early. They found it dead in a side chamber, its exoskeleton never having hardened properly, and its wings still crumpled and unable to unfurl. The creature lay against the chamber wall, its limbs folded in a way that suggested pain. It had lived long enough to move, long enough to crawl away from the cocoon, long enough to possibly understand it was dying. Voss photographed it from every angle. The body measured roughly 6 feet in length, and it probably weighed around 80 pounds based on appearance. Its gray, chitinous exoskeleton matched witness descriptions from 1966. The wings, even incomplete, showed a span that would have exceeded 10 feet when fully developed. The head retained that disturbing quasi-human facial structure, with compound eyes positioned where human eyes would be, large and red beneath a translucent covering. Crane delivered his professional assessment in a voice that shook, no matter how hard he tried to control it. He told them this was an unknown species of extremely large insect, exhibiting morphological features never documented in any arthropod. The humanoid characteristics were either convergent evolution or possibly genetic contamination. The scale violated every known biological constraint, because insects could not achieve this size under Earth's current atmospheric conditions. The oxygen levels were wrong, the physics were wrong, and this thing absolutely should not exist. But it did exist, and it had siblings, thousands of them, all developing in cocoons throughout the nest. The implications hit them all at once. Mothman was not a single creature. It was a species. The 1966 sightings were not a lone entity, but multiple individuals from a colony living beneath the TNT Area. The sightings stopped after the bridge collapsed because the colony went dormant. These cocoons in the nursery represented a new generation that would restart the sightings when they emerged. They spent 6 hours documenting everything they could reach, with Sable's footage providing comprehensive visual records, Crane collecting tissue samples from the dead specimen, and Haldane mapping the tunnel system as far as their equipment would let them go. Daylight was fading when they finally surfaced. The plan was to return with additional equipment and personnel. They sealed the excavation entrance with a locked grate. Not great security, but enough to keep out casual visitors, and they departed well after midnight. Merritt Haldane never made it home. When his vehicle was found the next morning on a rural road 3 miles from the excavation site, the driver's door was hanging open and the engine was still running. Search teams came up empty despite extensive efforts. No blood, no signs of struggle, nothing. He had just vanished somewhere between leaving the site and getting home. The police investigation went nowhere, but Voss knew exactly what had happened because something from the nest had followed them out. The team stopped returning calls after that. Crane left town without telling anyone where he was going, and Sable Drummond released portions of the footage online before she disappeared too. The video spread fast, but everyone dismissed it as elaborate fabrication, special effects, creative fiction, because nobody believed it could be real. Voss tried contacting authorities, filing reports with the Department of Natural Resources, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, academic researchers, providing coordinates and photographic evidence and sample analysis, but every single contact got him the same response: polite acknowledgement and zero follow-up. 3 weeks after Haldane disappeared, they sealed the excavation entrance with concrete, and the official documentation listed it as routine site remediation, with no mention of discoveries, no reference to nests or specimens. But sealing one entrance didn't change anything, because the nest extended across thousands of square feet underground with other access points, natural ventilation shafts, emergency exits still open, and those cocoons were still down there developing. Voss started monitoring for sightings, and by late summer the reports began appearing. Hikers saw something large flying above the tree canopy. Motorists caught glimpses of red eyes watching from roadsides, and descriptions matched the 1966 accounts perfectly. They described something large, winged, and gray. Sightings increased all through autumn. By December 2024, Point Pleasant was experiencing Mothman encounters at rates not seen since 1967, with local authorities attributing it all to festival tourism and anniversary attention. The explanation sounded reasonable except for the physical evidence nobody wanted to acknowledge. Tracks appeared in mud near the TNT area, large and six-toed, arranged in patterns suggesting bipedal locomotion. Vegetation was damaged at heights exceeding 15 feet, with branches snapped and stripped clean. Something large was moving through those forests, in fact multiple somethings, because the colony had emerged. Voss kept maintaining his database, documenting every sighting, every piece of physical evidence, every pattern that developed. The creatures hunted at night with flight patterns suggesting territorial behavior. Witnesses reported being watched from a distance, tracked along roads, and observed from tree lines. The intelligence was obvious because whatever these things were, they were not mindless insects. They planned, they coordinated, and they remembered. And the nest was still active down there, still producing more. Voss estimated thousands of cocoons remained in those nursery chambers, and if even a fraction reached maturity and emerged, the sighting frequency would increase exponentially until Point Pleasant transitioned from occasional encounters to permanent infestation. He tried organizing a second excavation team, but nobody would take the job because the footage was dismissed as fabrication. Haldane's disappearance was written off as coincidence, and the risk wasn't justified for pursuing a cryptid that officially didn't exist. Voss kept going alone. The TNT area stays accessible to the public during daylight hours, and the abandoned concrete igloos still attract photographers and curious visitors who walk the trails and leave without incident most of the time. Some report unusual sounds, others mention feeling watched, and a small percentage encounter something that sends them sprinting back to their vehicles, refusing to describe what they saw. The sightings database keeps growing while Voss updates it methodically, and the patterns are clear to anyone willing to actually examine them. The creatures are establishing a permanent presence. The dormant phase has ended and the colony is active and expanding. Someone will excavate that nest again eventually. And eventually officials will have to acknowledge what exists beneath the West Virginia soil. And eventually the truth will become too obvious to dismiss. But disclosure carries implications nobody wants to address because an unknown insect species of enormous size living in organized colonies raises biological questions with no comfortable answers. Where did they come from? How long have they been there? And how many nests exist beyond the one discovered in Point Pleasant? Because the TNT area isn't unique. Abandoned industrial sites and unexplored forest exist all throughout Appalachia. And the conditions that support one colony could easily support dozens more. The nest sits 47 feet below the TNT area right now, sealed behind concrete that will eventually crack and fail. The cocoons continue their development cycles while creatures emerge, hunt, reproduce, and expand their territory, and the sightings accumulate in databases that officials ignore and the public dismisses as folklore. The truth exists in darkness beneath soil and stone, waiting with red eyes and folded wings, and Voss is still there documenting it all, still searching for someone who will listen. The footage remains available for anyone willing to look. The evidence exists, and the nest is real. It's not empty, has never been empty, will never be empty. The Ohio River flows past Point Pleasant, dark and cold and indifferent to everything happening on its banks. The forest grows thick around the TNT area while the concrete igloos decay slowly in the rain. And something watches from the shadows above the tree line, something large, something gray, something that should not exist but does. The mystery isn't solved, the colony isn't contained, and the sightings continue while beneath the West Virginia soil in chambers that engineering can't explain and biology refuses to accept. Thousands more are waiting their turn to emerge.